Welcome to Classically Speaking, a podcast exploring the intersections of choral music, media, and culture. My name is Sam Estes. I'm a classically trained tenor, composer, and music technologist with a decade in experience in film, TV, games, and concert music. I'm also the founding member and current chair of Voices LA. On this episode of Classically Speaking, we'll be talking with my colleague Garry Schyman. Garry is an award-winning film, TV, and video game composer. Known for his iconic scores for games titles such as Dante's Inferno, Metamorphosis, Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, and of course, the award-winning BioShock franchise. His work often blends orchestral and choral textures, pushing the boundaries of video game storytelling through music. Welcome to the show, Garry Schyman.
Good to be here, Sam.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited. It's been a while since we've gotten a chance to chat, so really happy to have you on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for inviting me, and happy to talk about whatever you want to ask me about.
All right, let's dive in. Would you say Dante's Inferno is kind of like your largest choral score that you did?
Well, I think it's the most interesting choral.
I would say so.
I did. It really permitted me to do some really cool textures, and I mean the game, if for folks who are not familiar with it, is based on Dante Alighieri's famous treatise, including Inferno and others back, I think, in the 13th century. But in any event, it made a great video game.
I mean, I listened to the entire soundtrack, and it was pretty incredible. Very underrated. I mean, I think I might have played the game. When did it come out? Like 2008?
No, more like 2011 or 12.
Okay.
That era.
Okay.
So the one of the things that made it cool was it's set in hell. So I got to score hell, which was really cool. Along with Paul Gorman. Paul Gorman was the audio director and also composed a lot of cool music for it as well.
Oh, I got it.
There's a lot of music in the game.
Huh.
Yes, Paul wrote stuff. I wrote the theme, and I wrote, and we got to record it in London with the Philharmonia Orchestra and a fabulous choir, really absolutely shockingly good choir. They just, everything I thought might be difficult to achieve was done just effortless. At least it sounded to me effortlessly. And I've worked with choirs, and sometimes, you struggle, and sometimes you don't. Like, I had this incredible choir. So, but it set me free to like kind of really be very experimental and really have some fun with the choir. And sometimes just singing more traditional stuff, but also some fun effects and things like that. And they just nailed it. And that it makes it so much fun to record live instruments when the players and singers are very good. Because I've had experiences where it's like you're getting set, take 7, take 8, and it's like it's kind of a drag almost. I always love working with live musicians and orchestras. It's just so much fun. But when they get it after 2 or 3 or 4 takes, that's when it's like you're just really moving on and really getting great performances. And the Philharmonia was spectacularly good as well. I mean, they're one of the world's great orchestras. I had 8 horns. It was the 4 horns of the Philharmonia plus like the first chair of every like LSO, et cetera, in town. So like I remember one of the first cues I was conducting, and I remember it had a particularly challenging horn part, and I was going, holy crap, they're getting it. But in any event, that was incredible. So yeah, but I would say, the score won no awards. It got very, the game itself was not terribly successful. It actually did okay. It kind of got attacked for being too much like God of War in terms of gameplay. And God of War had it, and the game development team said, so what? It's just a style of gaming. It's just like any other style of gaming. So, who cares? It's an entirely different game. In any event, it's a very cool game, and I think I helped give it an unique.
I mean, like I said, I just listened to I to prep for this, I listened to a little bit of that. Obviously I know BioShock, and we'll talk about BioShock in a second, but like I I had never really played the game, never really heard the score, and I put it on. I was like, oh, this is really cool music. So I want to encourage anyone who's listening to the podcast, go check it out. It's on Spotify. It's an amazing score, like truly amazing. Can you talk about some maybe the influences you had for writing that, especially like on the choral level? Was there stuff you listened to, score studies, stuff that you did to capture some of the effects and the stuff that you drew to do this?
I was listening to Ligeti and Penderecki and George Crumb. I don't know if you know the music of George Crumb. Interesting enough, when I was at USC a long time ago now, as a composition student, he came to USC,
Hmm.
and I got to hear him talk and kind of met him, like shake his hand and next kind of thing. But so George Crumb was actually quite influential, maybe the most influential of any. And I remember thinking about Crumb and studying his scores because he had this there's a quirkiness to his music, and I wanted to, and a weirdness, and all in cool ways. And so that was also, something that influenced me. And Corigliano, of course, John Corigliano. What I learned from Corigliano, by the way, I'm gonna meet him for the first time in a few weeks.
Oh, he's great. I absolutely loved him.
Have you met him?
Yeah, he came. So I went to the University of Colorado for my master's degree, and he was there and he presented stuff and he gave a composing workshop, and he was really cool. Such a nice guy. I really liked him.
There's an event at Eastman School of Music that I'm invited to, and he will be there as well, called Soundtracks, and I'm looking forward to meeting him. He may not want to meet me, but I want to meet him.
He was really approachable.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was shortly after the Red Violin soundtrack, so he was really cool. But dude, George Crumb, he was my gateway drug into modern.
Oh, really? Yeah. Are you? Because not that many people are hip to George Crumb, but his stuff is so cool. Black Angels, of course,
my favorite score. Love that one.
But there's many other things, and some of his unusual vocal things are really wonderful and really cool stuff. So
cool. Yeah, I mean it shows, but it really came out well. So again, go check out that score. It's really cool. But wasn't there supposed to be a follow up to this game? It
was, but I think EA that published the game and paid for everything basically decided that it didn't have sufficient sales to justify another game. I was very disappointed because that was the word. Like if this goes well, we're gonna do. It didn't go well enough. But the word was me that it didn't lose money. It made money, but not enough money. And big games like that cost a lot of money to make, just like big films. BioShock Infinite cost $200 million. So it's like you think about that. Wow, that's an investment. And so I don't know if Dante's Inferno probably didn't. But even if something costs $30 or $40 million, that's a risk. And I guess they were just risk averse. I thought they should have kept it going. Of course, I would have gotten to write some more cool music for the next.
I would have loved to hear it.
Yeah, me too, man.
So let's talk about one of your more recent scores, Metamorphosis. You had a solo singer for that one, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Metamorphosis is based on Franz Kafka's book, Metamorphosis. Actually, it's based on more than Metamorphosis, but primarily Metamorphosis. It's also based on The Tower, which is another one of his interesting books. Kafka was a fascinating individual. Mm. And of course, in Metamorphosis, in the book, you become an insect. And so in the game, you play as an insect, and you actually there's an underworld where all the insects are, and they have like a whole civilization, which is kind of cool. So it has this sort of tongue-in-cheek quality to it. And it also, if you think about Kafka, that was the era of the so-called expressionist school of art in mid-Europe, Germany, Czechoslovakia. Franz Kafka was a Czech writer. So I said to Mikołaj Struinsky, who the game is made by a Polish company, Polish game company, and Mikołaj, who has been a friend of mine for many years, contacted me. Said, "Hey, you want to co-write something with me?" I go, "What is it?" He goes, "It's based on Metamorphosis." And as soon as he said that, I go, "That would be cool. That would be fun to do." So we did it together, and we did get an orchestra. We recorded it remotely in Macedonia because the budget was modest. But I said to him, let's do it like an expressionist score. And I sent him Parole in Air to listen to. And he was not familiar with that work. And
Huh.
I go, what if we have like Sprechstimme, and I mean that who's ever done that, At least we'll get the kudos of being the first Sprechstimme video game score, as if there'll ever be another. But it worked for this game
Hmm.
because it was an expressionist game in a way, the way they played the art. It had a sly sort of sense of humor. It wasn't like a ha-ha funny game, but it was sort of an interesting kind of tongue-in-cheek. And when you go down into the bug world, it's actually kind of funny. You meet characters and stuff like that. So I thought the Sprechstimme, if you think about it, has this sort of ironic quality to it
Yeah.
that will play that humor in, and not like Warner Brothers cartoon, but in a kind of interesting, because if you listen to the Sprechstimme style, which is half spoken, half sung,
Yes.
and so the story, there's kind of a little story with it. We wrote it, and the developers were like, whatever you guys think is cool. Nikolai and I didn't know how for sure it would work, the Sprechstimme, because there's no sample library. Cinesamples did not make a Sprechstimme.
No, we did not.
Library, unfortunately.
I don't know. 3 people buy that, maybe.
Me. And so we had to kind of like we wrote it as if like if the music would work without the Sprechstimme, and the Sprechstimme would be the icing on the cake if it really was working. So I hired a singer in Los Angeles who I'd worked with before, and I won't say her name. She said she could do it, and she couldn't. It wasn't working what she did. So I told Nikolai, and Nikolai said, "Let me try." He's in Warsaw, he comes to LA a lot, but he was in Warsaw. So let me see if I can find someone. So he found this singer, Joanna Freschel,
Hmm.
and she so nailed it. She just is just wonderful what she did. She elevated our music so much.
Hmm.
And so that was just so much fun to hear it and to mix it with her. We wrote the notes for her, but she brought the expression. She did exactly what I had hoped a singer would bring to the score.
Did you have an example of that you'd like to play?
This is called Corridors.
Okay. Very cool. That is
Yeah.
amazing that you got that into a video game, I have to say. I mean, I love it. I mean, it's beautiful, actually. What a cool chance to write something like that.
Yeah, it really was fantastic, and they loved it. They loved it, and the game actually did well. It was a low budget, moderately budgeted game. They just did a VR version of it, so
Cool.
the game has its own little following, and people love it. And we won the SCL award for best interactive score.
Yeah, I
So
saw that.
that was really fun.
Can we talk a little bit about interactivity with that? Because once you get it recorded, it's kind of locked, right? And for those of you who don't know a little bit about the video game scoring world, there's video game scores can have different levels, and you have different parts that are recorded, things that loop back and forth. So there's a bit of technical stuff that has to go on, right? So how do you approach some of the choral writing, some of this vocal writing in knowing that it does have to be interacted with? Do you set up different cue sheets? Do you set up different levels? Like, can you talk a little bit about that type of the technology that has to go into a live recording process?
Yeah, of course, it had an audio director that took our music and put it into the game. So we were not directly involved in that. And the interactivity, there's lots of different really interesting forms of interactive music. And it's complex. That's what I teach at USA, But in this particular game, it was not particularly complex. These were mostly loops. Just a piece of music that seamlessly loop. One thing we did do is we mixed all of these cues with Joanna, both with and without her vocal. Because it felt like the vocal was such a strong and interesting thing that you wouldn't want the loop you wouldn't want to keep hearing her vocal. So the first time you hear it is with Joanna, and then thereafter it loops without her vocal.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It becomes more subtle then, which I think actually worked quite well for the game. So that's the only thing that we did, and we just mixed it. And we had an engineer, of course, that mixed it for us.
Sure.
So, I was there though at the mix, as I really like to do. I really like to be at the mix, and happy and subtle little fixes, and hey, you missed an instrument, or did you bring up the vocal just a little bit or down a little bit? All those sorts of things. I love doing that. That's really kind of where you really hear your music fully mixed and sounding
great,
as good as it's ever going to sound.
Such a great experience. So you talked a lot about Ligeti, right? In your Dante's Inferno kind of listening experience and some Penderecki. Was there a... Oh, and Crumb too, of course. Crumb. Is there a particular cue that you could play for us that would be a really good example of that kind of score study that brought in that really added to this score using the choral parts?
Yeah, let me play a cue called Dante Kasarma Trelach. By the way, the language is called Enochian, which is interesting because Enochian is a language that was, quote unquote, discovered by two English gentlemen in the 1600s, obviously somewhere in England. And they said it was the language of the angels. And it's sort of, it's kind of not too many people know about Enochian, but we found it. And we thought, okay, well, if Enochian was the angel's language, then what would Satan be speaking? He was a fallen angel. He'd be speaking Enochian, right? So that's where we chose Enochian. We thought it'd be cool. The Latin, everybody does Latin, So this is actually kind of a chase combat cue. Here we go.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's so awesome.
intense.
That is really, really cool.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, that was there's a lot of interesting music like that, and there's a lot of combat music. I wrote a ton of combat
Hmm.
music for the game, and there's other choir cues that are actually beautiful.
Yeah, I remember hearing one that was very tonal, and it sounded just gorgeous. And it almost gave me a little bit of that, a little bit more of the modern choir vibe, that kind of Eric Whitacre kind of just like second relationships and various things. It was really pretty. So if you have that one queued up, I'd love to hear
I
it.
think it's this one, Redemption. Little darkness at the end, setting up the sequel, which never happened because Satan has not been destroyed.
Awesome. I mean, it's definitely your own voice there, and I know there's some nods to some of the other choral stuff out there, but it's really pretty. It's very beautiful, and I really it's a shame that this game score, the soundtrack, hasn't gotten more notice. It really should have. But let's talk about something that did get a lot of notice, BioShock. I mean, this is definitely kind of the crown jewel, and I mean, it's one of my favorite game series of all time. The storytelling's great, your music is amazing, the sound design's great. I mean, it's all around just such an amazing franchise. So I know there's not a lot of choral. In fact, I don't remember any
No,
choral,
I don't think
there's any voice or anything in
I
it. So
don't think so.
but we can talk a little bit about it because it is part of video game history, and it's I think it's important to talk about some of the music that goes into it. But what it could also bring up is like some of the challenges of maybe not having choral stuff, and some of these maybe we can talk a little bit about. Not every game needs a choral score, but if there were to be a choral score, what are some of the challenges with that? But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about BioShock and kind of your experience with it, and yeah.
When I was working on BioShock, I didn't know it was going to become really one of the most famous games of all time. You never know. You work on something and it could become the hit, or it could become a huge stud. I didn't have a huge budget for that score, interesting enough, but it was one of my earlier game scores. I'd worked on a game series called Destroy All Humans.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's
And,
great. The theremin you had in that one, that's brilliant
and,
score. I love that score.
but the audio director for the first Destroy All Humans was a woman named Emily Ridgway, and she went on to become the audio director for BioShock, and she really enjoyed working with me. She just said, "I want Garry to score it," and they gave her, they let her hire me, which was great. I didn't have to pitch for it or anything, and she just said to me at the beginning, she says, "This should not sound. This is going to be a really interesting game. Trust me." And says, "And the music should not sound like any other film, TV, or game score." And so I'm like, well, what the hell should it sound like? Well, geez, that was kind of a little intimidating, but actually it was kind of a cool opportunity again for me to like try to do something different. I incorporated aleatoric for the first time in my music for any project I'd ever worked on. I dabbled a little bit here and there over the years, but this felt like aleatoric could be an interesting part of the game, and it also has some tonal music and etc. So it's set. Anybody who's listening who's not familiar with BioShock, it's set in a city at the bottom of the ocean, like New York City, built by some genius or a group of geniuses at the bottom of the ocean. And they're trying to create like a utopian, place for great artists and the creative individual. And of course, it becomes dystopian, and you end up there, and it's pretty deadly. It's just a lot of battling and fighting, and so, but it's pretty weird. It's kind of, and so and so you know what? Look, you could not put these weird scores on, some, Angry Bird or something. You'd get fired. So you can't, Mario Brothers would not. But when you're given a project and it's like that unique and unusual, then you really can experiment and draw on things that you've known about for your whole career. Like, wow, I've always wanted to write a score maybe that had aleatoric music in it, or maybe because I studied 12 tone for 3 years when I graduated from USC, so maybe I could use some 12 tone, and all these weird techniques these 20th century techniques that I've always known about and loved in some ways. And I am a huge fan of the early mid 20th century music.
Schoenbergian.
Yeah,
in your word.
My teacher had studied with Schoenberg, which
really,
yeah, George Tremblay, an interesting guy. In any event, so it was just a chance to experiment and try unique ideas, and they went for it. I mean, I had to experiment until I found the right vibe for it. And then one day because I was working on it and trying things, and Emily said, "Yeah, that's really cool, but no, that's not it." And then one day I was experimenting with this sort of like really sort of interesting, completely almost aleatoric kind of vibe. It was a synth sound from Spectrasonics, and over it I put a solo violin playing sort of like a Bergian, almost not quite tonal, not really a tonal. And I go, that's really interesting. And I sent it to her, and she said, "That's it. That's the BioShock sound."
That's so cool.
And it was like epiphany, yes. And then it became, and then I just started working on it, writing it, and it was really fun, And then all those samples got replaced by real players, and I hired Martin Chalifort, who is the concert master of the LA Phil, to play all the solo violin stuff, and Armin Kazjikian played the cello parts, and it just really came together, and they loved them. They loved the music, and it was really fun, and that got a lot of attention. People really did find the score interesting, and so the BioShock then became BioShock 2 and then BioShock Infinite, which was also an interesting game. BioShock was the creative director was Ken Levine. He did not make BioShock 2. That was made by another part of 2K. 2K was the publisher that financed it all. But he made BioShock Infinite, which was it was related to BioShock, but it was a whole different setting in the sky, like almost like, a mirror image in a way, and that was a really fun and interesting project as well to score.
Yeah, I honestly, I think Infinite was my favorite of the series. To be honest, it was such a great game. I just loved it.
A great game. It is a great game, and I did that. When I first started, the audit director said, if we need to go to London, because we have plenty of money on this project. On the original BioShock, we did not have plenty of money. It was like, oh, here's a score, and you can, here's how much money you had. So I had like a 45-piece orchestra, period, for like a couple of days. But then said, if we need to go to London, we could spend, weeks, months, years there, But then we ended up scoring it with small string ensembles, which was that seemed to be the right direction for it,
I think that was a good call. I mean, honestly, it gave it that more intimate vibe, and the kind of that I don't know, it gave a periodicity to the to the soundtrack that I think was fantastic. Shifting gears a little bit, do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'm scoring a television show called The Envoy for Amazon Prime. Should be out soon. So I'm doing it's a series of shows. I'm starting the next episode pretty soon. So that has been kind of fun. I come from my beginning was all film and TV. I mean, when I started in the 1980s, a long time ago now, that's all I did was I worked for Mike Post and Pete Carpenter. Do you
Yeah.
know?
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
so Mike's still active actually, but so I was working on like the A Team and Magnum PI. I mean, games were not even on my agenda. It was like the games were like not. I don't think they even had scores. I mean, there was like Pong, the famous orchestral score for Pong, not so really wasn't a possibility. But so I love scoring to picture. You do score to picture when you score games, when you do cinematics or cutscenes,
Mhm.
and I've always liked something I love is scoring cutscenes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where we're trained and
Yeah.
what we like doing because that inspires us to do the thing. Don't you find it kind of, I don't know, almost at least when I've worked on video games, it feels very disconnected to be able to like, well, we got to build like these 6 levels and we've got to like have this and then it's this and it's got to loop at this section and then if we trigger this event, then this thing has to happen and all that kind of stuff. Don't you find that a little more disconcerting than writing to a cinematic? I mean, I don't know how
Well,
I
it
feel
depends.
about
It
that.
depends. It depends. I mean, sometimes you're just given, okay, here's a part of the game. We need a 2-minute looping cue and here's the setting. And someone will do some video game, or video capture of gameplay. They'll play the game at a current build and go,
Mm,
here's what it looks like. And it's sort of, to me, you're sort of writing, but you're writing to a vibe versus to picture. You're not catching anything. Okay. If you want to catch things, you can write stingers and those can be set up to catch certain events. But it's almost more like writing concert music in a way,
mm.
you know, or it can be, especially if you have a creative game that, like Dante's Inferno, you're writing these big orchestral cool things. So it kind of reminds me of like, Beethoven writing the Sixth Symphony, where he has a storm, and it's set, and so he writes to the storm. He creates a storm, but he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to play the storm to picture. It's just here's the storm at the beginning, and then the storm, and then the
Ah.
storm settles down. So it's kind of like that.
Curious, would you enjoy writing more that style of video game than directly to picture? I mean, what's your preferred style at
I
this
like both. I
point?
like both.
Okay.
I really do. I like to picture, and I like that as well. Sometimes some of these games, I did a game called Forspoken, and it's like a lot. I wrote a lot of music for that, a
Hmm.
lot, like I think over 3 hours, and it's like there was a lot of combat cues, and I was exhausted. I feel like I thought of every combination of combat cue in the style of that game that I could possibly conceive of. And we did have a choir for that, by the way, which
Okay.
was, yeah, yeah. The score was recorded in Nashville,
Yeah.
but we recorded the choir in Los Angeles. Uh,
Really?
yeah, yeah,
Ah,
at Warner's at
at
Eastwood Scoring Stage.
Eastwood
So
Stage.
yeah, so
Stage,
that
huh?
that did have a choir, and of course we have fabulous singers here in Los Angeles.
Good deal.
And in the program, the screen scoring program, every spring we have a choir recording session, and it's always fun. It's just something really cool. The students love it, and it's really great to have singers. They're so cool. I love working with people.
I don't know. I'm kind of biased, but I think when a choir's in a score, it makes it sound so much more expensive.
It's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful, and I don't care what the samples suck relative
They suck.
to real. I did something kind of interesting. I scored Defense of the Ancient Dota. I did a Dota thing
Okay.
for Valve, and they gave me a modest orchestral budget. I recorded it in Budapest, and I decided I would try something I wanted some choir in there, but I didn't have a lot. I didn't have a budget. I had a budget for maybe like 7 or 8 singers. So I said, what if the all the lower end, the male part of the choir is like sustained samples, which can sound really good if you say, and then I have all the melodic stuff in the live singers.
Hmm.
And that worked really well.
Yeah. I mean, combining samples I mean, it's often what we do.
Samples with live. With
Yeah,
live.
I mean, because and the thing is, like, as composers for this medium, we often have to mock up everything, and so the
Yeah.
producers get in love with the samples, and they're already there, and we kind of have to mix them in, so it's not too much of a shock, and hopefully it does sound better when you're using live
Yeah.
players.
But the samples became like the hamburger helper. to the live singers because I didn't have the budget for a whole choir. And the part that I think is the hardest to imitate with samples is the moving melodic parts, and that these women that they hired were fantastic. They were just wonderful.
That's
And
awesome.
that really elevated the score to have that. And then I had an orchestra. I had the Budapest. Budapest is very good for,
Yeah, no,
remote recording.
they're great. What was the very first piece of music that made you want to become a composer?
Well, in terms of film music, it was Herman's Mysterious Island.
Ah,
That I remember hearing that as a kid, and the score stood out to me. It's like, wow, that's really adding something that I didn't recognize in any other film score that I'd heard. And I loved that music. That really inspired me, Bernard Herrmann's Mysterious Island. So if you listen to the opening credits of that, you'll understand why.
oh, I totally understand why. It's such a great score. If you could rescore any classic video game with a choir, which one would you do?
Well, I've always thought Portal would be an interesting because I love Portal.
Yeah.
It has such an ambient score that it might be fun to have some moments in it with choir
Yeah.
that elevate it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it could be kind of an interesting thing to do. I just love that game so much. If Valve ever comes out with Portal 3,
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
um,
We could pitch it.
I think with choir.
Yeah, with choir. Yeah, I've often wanted to have a score that is largely focused in just choir, not just like as a background or like the traditional accompaniment choir.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to have maybe an a cappella choir for some really cool
Atmospheric
writing.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
that could be brilliant.
that's amazing. We've talked a lot about music. What is like your passion and hobby outside of music?
Oh wow, that is a good question. My wife and I love to take hikes and to hike in nature, and we both love it. So if we can go to a forest or somewhere natural or some beach or whatever, and just take a really long, we'll walk for an hour, and not hours, but maybe an hour and a half, 90 minutes or something, or more sometimes. And yeah, I love walking and especially if it's in nature. Yeah.
Okay, I have a really tough question. Music AI, is this going to be a tool to help composers, or do you think this is really going to hurt our industry?
My honest opinion is I don't know.
Okay.
There have been many technological changes that have affected when I started, it was the paper and pencil era.
Mm-hmm.
So, we didn't have any computer helping us at all. It was like my tools were a pencil and paper and a piano. That was essentially it. And then live musicians playing and we recorded it. And then the computer came along and that was like fantastic because like all of a sudden we could start to mock things up and we could really get feedback on, oh, this is really working. Or what if I did this? I could add some complexity to it that I might not have been assured would work. But once I could experiment with it, yeah, that really works. Then loops started coming in,
Mm-hmm.
But AI, of course, in some instances can actually write complete pieces of music. And so you're literally talking it through something. I want this, this, and this. And of course, we're at the beginning of that technology. So I think initially it might just become like another tool that enhances what the composers do. And so it could just, the fear is that it's just going to replace composers, and replace everybody in the film industry and the game industry. Like, make a game that's about this, about that. But I do think that what AI can't do is the kind of things like BioShock, which is like out there, and combining styles of music, like aleatoric with tonality with musique concrète. Who would think of that? Maybe a human who was challenged to do something that doesn't sound like anything else. So I do think the traditional skills of a composer, those folks who are writing very ambient scores may find that those scores are easily replaced by AI. But those who write really beautiful, who can write a melody and can orchestrate and really knows obscure styles of music like Sprechstimme and can add them into a score because it makes sense because of connecting expressionism and Franz Kafka might be something that you will only get with a human, So, time will tell. Will there be composers scoring games in 100 years?
Will there even be video games in 100 years?
I don't know. Will we even be that will we survive in 100 years? I don't know.
There's a whole other thing there too.
They said the
All right.
cockroaches will still be here, but not maybe.
Last cockroaches scoring music. That's I'll feed that into my AI.
Maybe they will evolve over a billion years into.
Amazing. All right, last question. If you were to go have coffee or a breakfast with a composer or a musical idol, who would that be and what would you talk about?
Oh wow! Well, I have a lot of those. I mean, Mahler, who I've loved his music, and he was I read the Delagrange 4 volumes on his life, so that would be kind of interesting. Philip Bartok, I love his music. Yeah. I think that fabulous to sit with Philip Bartok. God, there's so many fabulous composers, but man, Mahler and Bartok sort of strike me as two that would be really interesting. Whether they'd want to talk to me, I don't know that I would have anything interesting to say. I could tell them about how the future is going to turn out.
Yeah, there you go.
I would love to tell Mahler that his music is still being performed all over the world in 100, 150 years, because, he died young. He was only 52 or something like that.
That's right.
And I think it would be nice for him to know. And Bartok as well, his music is brilliant and an inspiration to me. One of the first modern composers who inspired me was Bartok.
Yeah.
Concerto for Orchestra was in music for strings, percussion, celeste, were things that just like, wow, this is so cool. That because I did like classical music and I was listening to Bach and Beethoven and playing them at the piano and such. But all of a sudden, the 20th century composers started to speak to me, and Bartok was one of the first, and it's had profound influence on.
Love Bartok. Absolutely. I mean, his sense of adapting the folk into the modern era and that sense, like bringing modality back, just really, I don't know, it spoke to me too. So I totally hear you on that. Well, Garry, thank you so much for joining us here on Classically Speaking. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to hanging out some more and chatting with you offline here.
Absolutely, Sam. Thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it very much.
Thanks, Garry.